In this section, we are going to talk about scenes. What makes a scene great? What makes a scene not so great? And so as we dive in there, first we need to remind ourselves, what are we talking about when we talk about a scene? Well, a scene is just a particular moment of time that we are going to observe as an audience or as a reader, where something is going to happen to our characters that causes some form of conflict that either moves them away from their goal or towards their goal. So a scene is a particular moment of time. So a story is a bunch of scenes all put together to make a story. You're not just going to have a one long ongoing scene where you're going to see everything that happens in that person's life because that might get boring. You're going to skip all the stuff that's not important and just focus on the key moments. And those moments are what we would call scenes. So there's a way to make a scene great, and there's a way to make a scene really not so great. And so when we think about how to write scenes, especially as you're thinking about how to write your short story and the scenes that you're going to have to use, there are some key things you want to think about when you write a scene. So let's go to our board. So here we're talking about scenes. What elements do we need? So the first thing a good scene has is that a good scene always has conflict in it. So we'll put conflict up on the board. Now, this might not be the key element in any particular scene, but there is conflict in the scene. So in fact, the best scenes have conflict all around them rather than just the main event that we're looking at. So in a scene, if we're watching a scene and there isn't any conflict, then our character's not having to respond to anything, and therefore nothing is really changing. And if nothing is changing in the story, we don't really need the scene. So a good way to look at your scene is to say, okay, what is going on in the scene? Is there conflict in this scene? Is he having or she having to deal with something unexpected? Is there tension rising at any point? Because if there's not any conflict in the scene, then we don't really need to see the scene. It's not a necessary moment of time. So great scenes will not only have single conflicts, but they might have even other conflicts. So imagine that you've got a guy sitting at, a coffee shop and a pretty girl sitting next to him, and he's wanting to get that girl's attention, but we're just sitting there and we're staring. Well, so far there's not any conflict in the scene. Now, if he's thinking about, I'm going to lean over and ask her a question, and then her boyfriend shows up, well, now there's a conflict there. There's a tension developing in the scene. And if you wanted to add even more conflict, you could make it really loud with loud music where it's really hard to hear things. You could have him right when he opens his mouth to talk, you could have him interrupted by a waiter delivering some form of coffee or food or something. And so conflict can be anything in the scene that is either pushing him away or pushing him towards the goal of the thing that he wants. So a good scene has that kind of conflict, and we don't ever want to write a scene that doesn't have conflict, because that just means it's a scene that's not really important. We can bypass it. We don't need to see it. That's an easy cut from your story. The other thing, well, there's two other things actually. The second thing we're going to look at is that every good scene has some sort of risk involved. That's a horrible K. Some sort of risk, something that could get lost. If you have a scene where your protagonist is needing to accomplish something and then conflict enters, well, we need to know if he challenges that conflict, what risk is at stake here? What could he possibly lose? If it goes good for him, what will he gain? But if it goes bad for him, what does he lose? So in our scene of our coffee shop person, if he's sitting here and the pretty girl's next to him and he wants to talk to the pretty girl, well, if he starts talking to her, the worst thing that could happen is the girl could just get up, walk away, and not talk to him. And wow, that would be awful. And as an audience, man, that would be awkward to be aware of that. However, the best thing that could happen is suddenly she could turn and really like him and start talking to him in a good way, right? So for him to open his mouth, there is a risk. There is something at stake where this could go really great or it could go really bad. So all scenes have this element of risk. They have an element of what could happen, what could go good, what could go bad. Is it worth the risk? And as our character has to deal with the risk, we, the reader or the audience, has to also kind of sit there in suspense about, oh no, what's going to happen if this doesn't go well? So that's the second thing. The third thing that a scene works is that great scenes work on two levels. Another way to look at this would be to say a great scene is about this. It's about this particular scene, but what the scene is really about is this. So there's a way to look at the scene for what the scene actually is. Like, what is going on? What are we physically viewing if it's a film? Or if we're reading, what is the writer telling us is going on? but then we have the other thing, what is actually going on in the script. And there's a bunch of ways to look at this, and so what we're about to do is we're going to look at a bunch of different clips where we can see a scene, we can see conflict in the scene, we can see risks involved in the scene, but also we can look at a scene and say, well, here's what's actually going on. But the scene is actually about something much deeper, and we, the audience, will know what that is when we see it, or if we're reading in a book, when we read it. But that's a great way to look at it. A scene needs to have conflict, it needs to have risk, it needs to have something that could be lost if the character doesn't follow through. And then usually a great scene works at multiple levels. It's about what's the scene about, and then what's the scene really about. So to examine that, let's look at these clips now. Okay, so we're gonna examine here some scenes and to see how the different scenes work. So we're gonna be looking at different things. So let's begin by looking at a scene from Nacho Libre. So in the scene, we have Nacho here, and he is clearly in love with that girl. And he is serving them something disgusting, but look at him, he's making eyes at the girl. He completely misses the bowl.
What is this?
Leftovers. Enjoy.
There is no flavor. There are no spices. Where are the chips?
Somebody stole them.
Did you not tell them that they were the Lord's chips?
I was trying to.
You are useless, Ignacio.
Silence, brothers. This is the worst lunch I ever had.
Your only job is to cook. Do you not realize I have had diarrhea since Easter's?
Okay. Maybe I am not meant for these duties. Cooking duty. Dead guy duty. Maybe it's time for me to get a better duty.
So this scene, if we're talking about just what's going on in the scene was he's serving breakfast, and that's what the scene was. We watched him serve breakfast and talk to people. But what the scene was actually about here was how Nacho is in love with that girl, and he's trying to impress that girl and make eyes at that girl, and he doesn't want to be embarrassed in front of the girl. So at the end of the scene, the conflict is not just that he's a bad cook. The conflict is that he is looking bad in front of the girl that he is trying to impress. So it's a scene, but it's functioning on multiple levels, and there's conflict within the scene. So let's take a look at another one. All right, so we're gonna look at this little scene from Cinderella Man. It's during the Great Depression. It's bad, unemployment is really bad, and our main character here, Russell Crowe, is unable to find work, and so he's got kids at home that he's returning to here.
I'm being good, I'm being quiet, I'm being safe.
Great.
Daddy! Daddy!
Hey, Rosie Chick, how you doing?
So the dad is already wrestling with the fact that he has no work, and they're extremely poor, and food is hard to come by. So he finds out that his son has stolen something.
What's all this about?
See? It's a salami.
Young lady, your brother's in enough trouble without you telling on him. You understand? It's from the butcher's. And you won't say a word about it, will you, Jay? Will you, Jay?
Okay, pick it up. Let's go. Do not test me, boy. Right now.
So now, of course, Russell Crowe is having to discipline his son for trying to bring food to the family because the family's in desperate need of food, but he's done it in a bad way by stealing. And so now the father has to punish the kid for doing something that is really the dad's job, providing food. But that's not all this scene is about. See, the physical thing is the boy is stolen, now he's returned the salami, but what is going on internally? What is the problem? And we're about to kind of discover it.
Marty Johnson had to go away to Delaware to live with his uncle.
Why?
His parents didn't have enough money for them to eat.
So we find out the kid is not wanting to have to leave his parents.
Yeah, well, things ain't easy.
So what's really going on in the scene is the boy doesn't want to be sent
There's a lot
away.
of people worse off than what we are. Just 'cause things
So you've got
ain't
the
easy.
action of the scene, but also you see the internal struggle of what the scene is really about.
We don't steal.
All right, so we're going to take a look at Castaway now. A great little film, again, with Tom Hanks. And we've got a guy on an island here sorting through FedEx packages. And he's been alone now for several days. He's running out of water. He has no food. And the scene, of course, is him showing you we don't have any water, and he's in a desperate situation. So now in the scene, he's opening up the boxes. Let's see what he has. I mean, it's a desperate situation, calls for desperate measures, opening other people's mail. Maybe you'll find some sort of life-saving device in there. It's always bad when you've got someone's divorce papers.
Happy birthday. The most beautiful thing in the world is, of course, the world itself. Johnny, have the happiest birthday ever. Score your grandpa.
So he continues to open item after item, seeing what they've got. Maybe some of this stuff could be useful. And now we have an interesting moment. He comes to this last package. And notice what's going on in the scene is he's not wanting to open the package, but we have to ask, well, why don't you just open it? It's not because it's a pretty box. What's going on? He's not going to open it. So what it's revealing to us is the scene itself is he opens stuff, but he doesn't open one. But then what we're actually seeing is he leaves it out because even though he's in a dire situation, he is leaving himself a reason to get off the island. He's leaving himself the reason, which is, I'm going to deliver this package. So even though it's really bad and the situation is dire and I'm willing to do some desperate things, I'm going to make sure I leave myself a reason to get off this island. Because without the reason, well, in a desperate situation, you might do something harmful to yourself when you're stuck on an island long enough. So he has a reason to get off. So we have the scene, but we have the real meaning of the scene as well. All right, another scene from Castaway here. It's one of my favorite moments. In his desperation, he needs to make fire. He's got to be able to cook some food, otherwise he's going to be in a bad shape. And fire is kind of a necessary item. So he's working real hard. Oh no. So he's cut himself. Now he's throwing a fit. Now, is this really because he just cut his hand? I mean, look at him. He's screaming. He's mad at the world. You know, but really in the scene all he's done is he's cut himself, but he's really angry. But what we're seeing is he's not just angry because he cut himself. He's angry because the situation is so dire, and he's just expressing his overall hopelessness and frustration of being on an island by himself, alone, with no support. And so all of it's kind of coming out now as he's got a cut. So there's a lot more going on than just he got a cut. He's dealing with a lot of emotions and the fact that he's been alone for days. All right, so now he's got a ball. Wilson. We love Wilson. Now, why would he do this? He's sitting here. He gets the thing wet. He's going to make some eyes and a nose on the ball here. But why does he stop and do this? Is this really... I mean, it's an interesting scene, but why is he doing it? And it's funny because he's doing something creative. He's allowing his mind to do something simple. But it's also got a little bit of a deeper meaning. He's just wanting to see a friendly face. It'd be so nice to see another face here on this island since he's been by himself, that even though it's on a ball, even though it looks ridiculous, he's made himself a face. So now he can return to work, and in the scene is now, it's better. It's released some tension because he was alone a second ago, but now he's kind of not as alone as he was before. And it's funny how just having another face staring at him has now made him very aware that there's a face staring at him while he does this. And his behavior is immediately changing.
You wouldn't, Mac, by a chance, would you?
And now we have interaction. He's been alone for a while, but he kind of looks over like, did you see that? And of course, he's just talking to a ball, but he needs some sort of interpersonal connectedness here. He has to have it.
To it.
And so suddenly we have him talking to a ball, but now here in a second, we're going to switch the scene because, again, there's so much other stuff going on other than he's trying to make a fire. There's so much more. The fire is representing, if he can make this, if he can get the fire going, then he might have a chance, in essence, to survive out here. Let's hear him. He's saying, I did it, I did it. So now look at him. He's dancing. He's having a great time around a fire. But he's not just happy here because he's made the fire, even though that's what the scene is going on. He looks really happy. Look at him. I've made fire. Look how big it is. Now he's going to get a big thing. He's so excited he made a fire. But really what this is about is that he has secured the fact that he may end up being able to survive out here longer than the next 2 days. He's going to be able to cook food. The fire is representing life. He has bought himself some time, some life. So you have the scene, what it's about. And here in the scene, while he's facing difficulties, he's managed to do two major things. One, he's given himself life. He's given himself a reason to live by not opening the package from a minute ago. And now he has also established a interpersonal connection to a ball, which is quite fun. All right, so we're going to look at this scene from Super 8. And the father and son are going out to dinner here at this restaurant. And the father's trying to talk him into going to a baseball camp for 6 weeks.
Hands-on training with college coaches. You'd like it. I know I did.
I thought I was going to have the summer for
Well,
myself.
things have obviously changed for us. And it'd be good for you to spend some time with kids who don't run around with cameras and monster makeup.
I have to help Charles finish his movie.
So is this scene really just about them getting dinner and Dad wanting a camp?
I've got nothing against your friends. I like your friends. Except for Carrie, who can't seem to stop lighting things on fire. You'd like it there. It's what we both need.
See, this scene is about so much more. Look, there's the mom's locket in his hand. It's about so much more than just a father and son out at dinner. The father is trying to deal with the fact that without the mom around, he feels like he is not a good parent, and so he needs a break because he doesn't know how to parent the son. So he's looking for a way to get rid of the son for a while. So sending him to a 6-week baseball camp, that sounds like a great idea. But the son, of course, doesn't want to leave his father because his father's all he has left because the mother's gone, and he's still clinging to the memory of his mother, and you can see that in his hand. So when the father looks over and sees the son still holding on to the mom's locket, the father realizes that, yeah, you know, they're both actually dealing with the same deal. They're dealing with how to move on with life when the mom is gone. So the scene is just about them having dinner, but it's about so much more than that. All right, so all of those clips are examples of great scenes, single moments of time. There is conflict involved in each. There is risk involved in each. Something could be lost. There is fear involved. And then most of those scenes work very well in 2 levels. They have what the scene actually is, what are we actually watching, and then what's the scene really about. So as you are developing scenes in your story and what moments to pick, first thing you need to do is think, okay, well, the story that I wanted to tell is this, and here it is. But to tell it, I only need to pick out these scenes to tell the story. You don't want to do bunches of scenes. And then as you think about what scenes you need to remember that if the scene doesn't have conflict, if it doesn't have risk, if there's nothing up for grabs, if it goes wrong, if it can't work on a couple different levels, it's probably not the best scene. You may want to consider cutting that one. But if a scene does have these things, then that is the scene that you want to grab in your story. And so to help you with that, we're going to look at this section's project where you're going to deal with this directly.